The tighter you hold on, the less control you actually have. You feel it. The more you try to manage everything, the heavier it gets. And at some point, you're not in control anymore. You're just reacting. Letting go doesn't remove control. It's the first time it becomes real. Most people think control is strength, that if you can manage everything, you're doing it right. But most of that control comes from somewhere else. Not clarity, fear. Fear of losing something. Fear of things going wrong. Fear of not being enough to handle it. So you tighten your grip. You think more. You check more. You try to predict everything. And slowly, everything starts to feel heavier. Not because life changed, because you carry more than you need to. This is the part most people avoid. You never had full control. Not over outcomes, not over people, not over timing. Things happen with or without your permission. And deep down, you know that. But instead of accepting it, you try to compensate. You try to close every gap to make everything certain. And that effort creates tension. The tension feels like responsibility, but it's not. It's resistance. The real struggle is not outside, it's inside. It's the constant push. This has to go a certain way. And when it doesn't, you tighten more. You overthink. You second guess. You try to force alignment. And that's where your energy goes, not into moving forward, into fighting what already is. And that fight never ends, because reality doesn't adjust the tension. When you let go, something shifts immediately. Not outside, inside. The pressure drops. You stop arguing with what's already happening. And when that argument stops, your mind clears. Decisions become simpler. You see things you missed before, not because something changed, because you're not clouding it anymore. Letting go doesn't give you more control over your life. It gives you control over your response to it. And that's where everything actually happens. This is where most people get it wrong. They think control equals holding on. Letting go equals giving up. That's not true. Control is rigid. Letting go is responsive. Control says this has to work. Letting go says I'll handle whatever happens. One creates pressure, the other creates stability. And stability is what people are actually looking for. And if you're used to controlling everything, letting go feels wrong. Not because it is, because it's unfamiliar. You built your sense of safety around planning, predicting, managing. So when you stop doing that, it feels like you're losing something important. But what you're losing is tension. And tension can feel like control if you've been holding it long enough. When you grip too tightly, you stop seeing clearly. You overthink simple decisions. You hesitate. You miss opportunities. Because you're trying to control the outcome instead of respond to what's in front of you. And that slows everything down. Real control is quiet. If you look at people who are actually in control, they don't rush. That's the first thing. Something changes and they don't react immediately. They wait, not passively, deliberately. Because reacting too early means you respond to fear, not reality. Most people can't hold that gap, that moment between what happens and what they do. They fill it with thoughts, with reactions, with unnecessary movement, because stillness feels like losing control. So they interfere. And that interference creates the instability they were trying to avoid. Real control is not doing more. It's not acting until you actually see clearly. That's the difference. Not effort, timing. And most people lose control because they move too early. And that leads to something most people don't see. You don't lose control when things go wrong. You lose it when you need things go right. That's the difference. If your stability depends on the outcome, you're already unstable. Because outcomes move. They don't stay where you want them. So the moment something shifts, you react. Not because the situation demands it, because your control was tied to it. That's why it feels fragile. You're not controlling anything. You're trying to hold something still that was never still to begin with. The shift is simple. You stop needing things to go a certain way, not because you don't care, because you're no longer depending on it. That's where control returns, not outside, inside. And that changes how you move. You don't rush decisions. You don't overreact. You don't force outcomes early, because you're not trying to secure certainty anymore. You're able to stand inside uncertainty. That's control. Not managing everything, not predicting everything, but staying stable when nothing is guaranteed. And once you can do that, your actions change. Cleaner, more direct, less reaction, more intention. The moment you stop trying to control everything, you notice something. You're not weaker, you're clearer. Because you're no longer reacting to every shift. You're not trying to hold things in place. You're able to see them as they are. And that changes how you move. Not faster, more precisely. You don't chase outcomes. You don't force timing. You don't try to secure certainty before you act, because you don't need it anymore. That's the shift. And once that becomes real, control stops being something you reach for. It stops being something you try to prove. It becomes something quieter, something stable, something you don't lose when things don't go your way. Because it was never in the outcome. It was always in you. And once you see that clearly, there's nothing left to hold on to. There's nothing left to feel letting go of. That's control.